Masechet Yevamot Daf Samech Gimel. Today's daf is all about marriage. We ended last time with a beautiful braita about one who loves his wife and honors his wife more than himself, and all the blessings that come with marriage. So now we have a siman, a mnemonic device to remember the various statements we're going to see about Isha v'karka ezer zo sheteh berachot hagare fachte. Okay, the following are 7 statements by Rabbi Elazar, all about this theme. Amar Rabbi Elazar, kol adam she'en lo isha, eno adam, a man without a wife is not even called a man. Shneimar zachar unkeba b'ram vayikrat shemam Adam. As it says, Hashem created male and female and called them Adam. If it's only Zachar without Nekeva, then he will not be called Adam. ואמר רבי אלעזר כל אדם שאין לו קרקע אינו אדם שנאמר השמיים שמיים לאדוני והארץ נתן לבני אדם. Furthermore, a person who does not own land is not called a human being, is not called a man, because it says the heavens are for God and he has given the earth to Bnei Adam. So if one has a piece of land, then he's called an Adam, otherwise not. Third statement, what does this mean? That when Adam was alone, Hashem said, okay, I'll make him an azer, so someone that will be helpful, kenegdo, opposite him. Zacha or zarto lo zacha kenegdo. These 2 words seem to be opposite in meaning, and the idea is if one merits, then he has someone who will help him. If he does not merit, then he will have someone who will oppose him. Vika de amre Rabbi Elazar Rameh ketiv kenagdo vekarenan kenegdo zacha kenegdo lo zacha menagadto. Or a second version is not from the 2 words ezer and kenegdo, which are in tension, but rather this word itself kenegdo, since is not written with vocalization, it could be read kenagedo, which in Aramaic means to whip someone, or kenegdo, meaning alongside him. So if one merits, then he has someone who will help him. That will be a partner alongside him. If does not merit, then it will be like lashes. Ashkache Rabbi Yosef Lildiahu Amar le ketiv aser lo azer bama isha ozato laadam. One time Rabbi Yosef found Eliyahu Nabi, and whenever we have lots of stories about this, Eliyahu is always a good insight into what's going on up in heaven, things that we can't know down here. So this question is curious in that sense. Is he asks, what does it mean that a wife is a helpmate? In what way does a wife help a person? Right? As if we can't figure that out here. We need Eliyahu to come and tell us. Amar le Adam mebi chatin koses pishtan lobesh lo nimset meira einav ma'amidato al raglav. And Eliyahu answers, a person, usually the men would go out and work in the field, and they would bring home raw wheat and raw flax. So he says, wheat, can a person chew on wheat? Can you eat it? If you have flax, can you wear raw flax? No, it's he brings it home, and then the wife will process it into bread and clothing. So you see how a wife enlightens the eyes of a person by giving him food, and lets him stand on his feet by giving him clothing. So having a wife is very important. There you go. All right, it's a funny story, as if we need Eliyahu to tell us this. Amar Rabbi Elazar, my dichtiv zot hapam esem asama basar mebesari. There's a in-between stage. First, Hashem says it's not good for man to be alone, and then he creates all the animals to see what man would call each of them. And then it's not his type, they don't work out. So then only afterwards, when Hashem creates Chava, this time this is my bone and my flesh of my flesh, because literally Chava is made from his side, or rib, selah, whatever that means. Okay, this midrash of Rabbi Elazar says, "Melamed sheba Adam al kol behema v'chayav lo nitkara da'ato ad sheba al Chava." He wasn't only naming them and looking at them, but rather he actually had bi'ah with each of the animals, and found that each one was not his type. Not only not his type, they weren't even his species. So he was not at ease with any of them until he found Hava. What does it mean regarding Hashem's blessing to Avraham? That all the families in the earth will be blessed through you. The word v'nibrechu can mean blessing, but it could also the same, similar to the word lehavrich, which means to graft one branch onto another. And he told Abraham, there's two wonderful branches that will be grafted onto you, and they are Ruth HaMoaviyah and Naamah HaAmmonit. These are two non-Jews from other nations that will join together with the Jewish people, and one of them is Ruth, who was originally a Moabite, but she came and joined the Jewish people and converted, and through her came David HaMelech, and also Naamah, one of the foreign wives, the Ammonite wives of Shlomo, whose son was Rehavam, who was then the next king and continued the dynasty. Kol mishpechot hadama, and then further says all the families of the earth. Afilu mishpechot hadarot ba'adama mitbarechot ela bishbil Yisrael. Even families that live on the earth, meaning in other lands, they have lands of their own. So not only those who come and convert, but even those other countries are blessed because of Israel. As you could say, as a merit, when Israel does good and merits good, then the whole world receives blessing. Could be a more direct way when Israel is at the cutting edge of high tech or medicine and good things, and brings good things to the world. And as we see today, all nations benefit from that. Kol goyeh haaretz afilu sefinot habot megalia le'aspamya enan mitbarechot ela bishbil Yisrael. And not only on land, because the pasuk goes on and says, Kol goyeh haaretz. So even ships that are going from one land to another, from Galia to Spain, the ends of the Roman Empire, are only get blessed because of Israel. Amar Rabbi Elazar atidim kol ba'alei umaniyot she'amdu al hakarka shenemar v'yadu me'oniyotehem kol tovse mashot u'malachim kol choblei yam al ha'aretz yamodu. The next statement of Rabbi Elazar is that in the future all people who are mariners, pilots of the sea, sailors, will all come and be on land. I guess it's a difficult life to be on the ocean all the time, and so they'll be able to merit and stay on dry land. As Pasuk in Yechezkel says, all the hand of the mariners, they will all stand on dry land. On the other hand, Rabbi Elazar also said that there's no lower form of work than working the land, because it says v'yadadu, they will go down. So this is the lowest form of work. Seems to be a bit of a contradiction here, because it sounds like this is a benefit for the sailors that they could be on land. On the other hand, he says that there's nothing lower than being on land. Maybe his idea is that even though manual labor in the land is a lowly form of work because it's backbreaking work, nevertheless it grounds one and makes one humble, dependent on the rain, on the earth, and looking up towards heavens all the time. So there's something good about it, even though it is a difficult labor. Rabbi Elazar Chazia lahi ara deshti ba kerava lefutya amar le I tishdeye leurke chapuche biska tab minach. But on the other hand, we have another statement that says that business is better than working the land. And here Rabbi Elazar saw that some land that was plowed across its width, or maybe that it was full of produce across the whole width of the land, and he said, even if you were plowed along your entire length, even bigger, or you had produce all across your entire length, still iska doing business would be better than this, because there's a limited amount. Even if you have a good crop, it's still a limited amount. Whereas when one is engaged in buying and selling, then one could make a lot more money. And so this is going back to say working the land is the lowest form of work. Being involved in business is better. Rav was a similar story. Rav was walking between the sheaves and they were waving back and forth in the wind. You could wave all you want and look like you're so fancy, boasting, look how much wheat and grain there is here, but doing business, buying and selling is still better than you. Amar Rava, similar statement that Rava says, if you invest 100 dinar into business, every day you can have meat and wine, because that the investment will continue to bring rewards. Whereas if you invest that same amount in land, all you get is salt and vegetables. It's a limited amount of return. And not only that, working the land, you have to lie down on the ground because you have to guard it at night so animals and thieves don't come, and also causes fights with your neighbor. This is my land, this is your land, and so better to go into business and be a merchant. Amar Rav Papa, Rava himself did live in a city, and so he probably himself was a merchant and saw the merchant life is better than the rural life. Amar Rav Papa zera vela tizben. Rav Papa said better to sow your own produce and don't buy it. Don't be dependent on the market for your food. You should grow things yourself, and then you'll always be self-sufficient. It's true for sure for any country and even for every person. So Rav Papa preferred farming. And even if it's the same price, whatever you grow and you would sell, the same price as what you would buy in the market, nevertheless, when it's your own, you get blessing from it. Zaben vela tezul. On the other hand, it's better to buy clothes rather than weave them yourself, because that's a tremendous amount of work to have to weave clothing. But that is only true regarding mats. Better to buy mats and not have to weave them yourself. But if it's your own cloak, then better to sew it yourself, because then you'll get a perfect fit rather than buy a pre-fit one from the marketplace. Tom vela teshapes. If there's a hole in your house, just close it up, patch it up, and don't quickly before it spreads. And don't plaster aval teshapes, and do not make it bigger and plaster it. Shapots vela tibne. Or if you're going to plaster it, fine, plaster it, but don't rebuild it. In other words, spend as little as possible. Just cover it up. It doesn't matter if it looks perfect. It's not worth spending a lot of money to knock down the whole thing and rebuild. Why? Anyone who is involved in construction will become poor. As many people know from experience, once you start knocking down one wall, then you say, we may as well knock down the other wall, and now while we're at it, and then something else falls down, and there's no end to construction costs. Even if you figure in it's going to be more than you think, ends up being more even than that. All right, good advice. Kefos zaben ar'a metun naseb iteta. You should always hurry and buy land. If land becomes available, invest. After all, they're not making any more of it. But when it comes to marriage, be patient and make sure to marry the right person. Nechet darga nesib iteta. And when you're choosing a spouse, it's good to go down a level of social status. If you want to marry someone from higher status, then it's going to be a burden to keep up with her standards, and so lower status makes it easier. On the other hand, for friendship, saktarka behad shushbina. A shushbin is like a best man, a good friend. In that case, it's good to go up a level of social status, and then you become friends with them and go into business and have investors, and so there's benefits to having a friend from a higher class and a wife from a lower class. Amar Rabbi Elazar bar Avina and Pur'anut ba'a le'olam ela bishbil Yisrael. We saw above that blessing comes to the world because of the Jewish people, but also the opposite, that calamity comes to the world because Israel are not doing the right thing. Shneimar hichrati goyim nashammu pinotam echerabti husotam. Pasuk in Sephaniah says, I have cut off nations, their corners are desolate. I have made their streets waste. Why? The next pasuk in Sephaniah says, "Uchtiv amarti ach tirei oti tikchi musar." You should fear me. You will receive correction, because the Jewish people have not done teshuvah. That's why it brings negative not only to them but also to their surrounding nations. Rav hava mipatam Rabbi Chiya amar le rachamana lislach memideh dekashe mimota. Rav, when he would take leave of his teacher to be Chiya in Eretz Yisrael and go back to Bavel, Rav Chiya told him, may Hashem, may the merciful one save you from something that's worse than death. So we wonder, what could be worse than death? So he went out and checked. Nafak dak vashkach umose ani marmi mavet at haisha. Oh, it's actually a pasuk in Kohelet that says, I found something, moseh. I find something that is worse than death, and that is a wife who was not a blessing. Rav hava kam misa'ara le debitu. In fact, Rav, this very sage who Rabbi Chiya was talking to, his wife would cause him a lot of suffering. Ki ahamar la abidi li telofache abdale chimse abdale telofache. Whenever he would ask for something for dinner, he would say, can you make me lentils? She would make him peas. If he asked for peas, she would make him lentils. She would purposely do the opposite just to annoy him. So he had an unfortunate relationship. Ki gadal Chiya bere apechla. He had a son named Chiya. It was not only his teacher, but also Rabbi Chiya, but his son was named Chiya. So then the father would tell the son, Chiya, go tell mom to make lentils. So Chiya was smart, and he would say the opposite, so that the mother would make the thing that the Rav actually wanted. So apechli, he said the opposite. Amar le aliyah lach imach. Rav was impressed after a few days. He noticed this. He says, "Oh, your mom has improved, right? Now she's making the thing that I actually asked for." Amar le anahu deka apichna lech. He says, "No, I'm the one that switched it, right? Whatever you tell me, I tell her the opposite, and then she does the opposite of that. So the opposite of the opposite is the correct thing." Amar le hainu deka amri inashed denafek minach tama madfach. And Rav says, "Oh, this is what the common saying says, that what comes from you is better than you." Sometimes that your child can teach you something that is wise. He who comes from you shall teach you in wisdom. But nevertheless, at la tabid hachi, Rav tells his son, still, even though it works, don't do this. Because Pasuk in Yirmiyah says, people teach their tongue to speak lies. So even though it's working, but then you're getting used to saying lies, and then that leads to sin. And so therefore, better to get along with peas instead of lentils, and tell the truth, and don't cause lies, even though that did resolve this situation. Rabbi Chiya himself, he's the one that told Rav, right, was what's worse than death. He also had a wife that would always annoy him. Whenever, yet Look how he treated his wife. Whenever he would find something nice, he would wrap it in a shawl and bring it to her. He would always bring her gifts and things that he knew she would appreciate. Rav was surprised. How come you treat your wife so nicely and bring her gifts all the time, even though she causes you so much suffering? This is enough. It's sufficient that she raises my children and saves me from sin. That wives in general, raise children and save their husbands from sin, and that itself is worthy of me giving her gifts all the time. So he finds the good within the negative. Makri le Rav Yehuda le Rav Yitzchak bere umose ani mar mimavet et haisha amar le kegon man kegon immecha. One time Rav Yehuda was reading Pesukim with his son Rav Yitzchak, and he got to this pasuk Kohelet that says, I find something worse than death, and that is a woman. And so the son asks, like, for example, who? Where do you see such a terrible person? And he said, like your mother. Okay. Hold on. Did he say that? There's another time that Rav Yehuda taught Rav Yitzchak, the same father and son. It says a person does not find peace of mind except from his first wife. Shenemad, hi mekorecha baruch, usmach me'eshet ne'orecha. Your fountain should be blessed and have joy from the wife of your youth. Someone's first wife is the best. And the son asks, like, for example, whom? Like your mother. That was his first wife. So here we see that his wife was good. Matkif tikifa vibure mi'abera b'mila. So how could it be? How could it be that is bad and good? He says, well, his wife was on the one hand very strong and forceful. On the other hand, she was also easily appeased. So she had both of these qualities. And sometimes she would get upset and angry, and she was really tough. And in that case, he felt like she was marmi mavet. On the other hand, she was, he said sorry, and then she was good natured and happy, and then he called her samach. She was the joy of his life, and so she was both. Gemara asks, what does that mean to have a wife who brings bad? For example, a wife who arranges a table for her husband, and then she also arranges her mouth and insults him the whole time. So she makes a nice dinner for him, and then they sit down together at dinner, and she has nothing nice to say. So that's she does both. Or, for example, she arranges a nice table for him, and then she turns her back and says, like, she's not interested in spending time with him. So it's the double-edged sword. That's called Isha Ra'a. Amar Rabbi Hama bar Hanina kevante שנשא אדם אישה עוונותיו מתפקקין שנאמר משא אישה משא טוב ויפק רצון מהשם. If once a person gets married, then all of his sins crumble, because now his wife will keep him in check and make sure he does good. As Pasuk in Mishle said, whoever finds a wife finds good, and also will get favor from Hashem. So that's it, favor from Hashem, because his sins are gone. In the West, in Eretz Yisrael, whenever a person got married, this is what they would tell him: Masa or Moseh, which one applies to you, right? Masa, this pasuk, Masa Isha Masa Tov, or Moseh, right? Masa dichtiv Masa Isha Masa Tov, or is it Moseh dichtiv Moseh ani mar mimavet et haisha? So which of the pasukim, the one from the Mishleh or the one from Kohelet? We ask him, right? How's your marriage? How's it going there? Did you is it this finding or that finding? Amar Rava Isha Ra'a misva legarsha dichtiv garesh les v'yesem adon v'shbot din v'kalon. Rava says, if someone has a bad wife, better to get divorced. Divorce isn't good, but if it's not working out, then better to separate. As the pasuk says, cast out the scorner, and contention will depart, strife and shame will cease. Right? That's a good way to stop fighting, is to divorce. How, on the other hand, when someone gets divorced, then he has to pay the ketubah. The ketubah could be a big amount. So Rava says, if someone has a bad wife and the ketubah payment is a lot, then here's the solution. Sarata besida. A rival wife is right there on the side. Just threaten, say, listen, I'm going to marry another wife. And then she'll be a pain to this current wife, and that'll be a way to threaten and try to bring some balance without having to divorce and pay the ketubah. If you want to annoy a woman, better a co-wife is even more annoying to her than thorns. Nishtava. That bad wife is worse than a day of heavy rain. As it says, continual dropping on a very rainy day. A contentious wife, they're all the same, right? When it's raining, you can't get out from under the rain, from getting wet. You go here, you go there, and so too, a contentious wife always causing a person to suffering. Right? From one extreme to the other, Rava says, see how great is a good wife and how terrible is a bad one. Tova mishta'ekera kama tova isha tova shakatu mishabecha. So look how good a good wife is. Pasuk says, if someone finds a good wife, he found goodness. Now, if this we take this in literal sense as talking about a wife itself, right? Look how the pasuk says, right? Look how good a good wife is, that the pasuk goes and praises her. And if you take this as a figure of speech, iba Torah mishta'ekera, that's really talking about metaphorically of Torah, that one finds Torah, finds good. Kama tova isha tova shatorah nimshala ba. Nevertheless, it shows how good a good wife is. That when you want to praise Torah and you want to say it's like something very good, what's the symbol? What's the metaphor used to praise Torah? A good wife. So that's all the more so. That shows that a good wife is the best thing that you can imagine, that you would compare Torah to. Kamara Aisha, on the other hand, how bad is a bad wife? Tichtiv u'moseh ani mar mimavet et ha'isha. I begava mishtaikera kamara Aisha ra'asha ketub megana. So same thing with the other pasuk. I find something worse than death, and that is a contentious wife. If it's talking literally about one's wife, then you see, look how bad the pasuk goes and says, calls this something really terrible. But if this pasuk is actually a metaphor for Gehinam, and saying that if someone found Gehinam is really bad, well, look how bad a contentious wife is, that when you want to compare Gehinam, you know how bad Gehinam, it's so bad, it's bad as, and so the worst thing that you can imagine is a contentious wife. And so there you go, having a good or a bad wife is the opposite extremes, makes life fantastic or terrible. Pasuk in Yirmiyah says, I'm going to bring evil on them that they won't be able to escape. What's something that's terrible that you can't get out of? That's a bad wife, and the ketubah is a lot. It's a bad situation, and you can't get out of it because you're going to have to pay this large ketubah, so you can't get divorced. Netanani Hashem bideh lo uchal kum. Nechas is Hashem has given us into the hands of a nation that we cannot stand up against enemy. Amar Rav Chisda Amar Morokva Bar Chia Zo Ishara Ach Tubata Meruba. Okay, we take a pasuk that's talking about the evil Babylonians that are destroying Israel, and he says, no, this is not talking about that. It's talking about a contentious wife and his the ketuvah is a lot, too much to pay. So can't divorce her. Or a different interpretation altogether. This is someone whose food is dependent on his money. Back to what we said before, if a person has a farm, then he can grow all his food. He's not dependent on anybody else. But when he does not grow his food and he has to go and buy it, and the market goes down, the market goes up, and so his very food is dependent on cash flow and market prices. So this is a problem. You're dependent on something that you cannot control or withstand. So more about this is from Echad. We go to the Kilalot in Sefer Devarim. It says your sons and your daughters will be given to another people. Literally means some enemy will come and take them captive. Amarav Chanan Barava Amarav Zo Eshet Ha'av. Barav says no, it's not referring to an enemy people, but rather to a father's wife, meaning a stepmother. All right, a stepmother takes care of her stepchildren, and often that does not work out well. Begoy Nabal Ach Isem Amarav Chanan Bar Rava Amarav Zo Isha Ra'a Uchtubataha Meruba. When it says talk about provoking with a vile nation, right? That's a terrible thing. Rav says this is referring again to a contentious wife whose marriage contract is large. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Elu Haminim. Rabbi Eliezer says no, this Naval here is not talking about that. It's referring to the heretics, the Sadducees. Vechenu Omer Amar Naval Libo and Elohim, because the word Naval appears here. It also appears here. Those who say there is no God. It's not clear which heretics is referring to. Is it some philosophers, or maybe Sadducees who don't think that God is cares or is providential or gives reward and punishment. Or another interpretation of this vile nation are the Barbarya. Okay, this is the same word as barbarians or Berbers. This is what the Greeks called the people in North Africa when they met them and heard them speak. Their language was not refined like Greek. It sounded to the Greeks like they were saying bar. So they call them barbarians. And until today, the Berber tribes still live in Morocco. And Martinai is Mauritania, also in North Africa. So these are these tribes that live in North Africa that walk naked in public. And this is Naval who say there's no God. Because nothing more hated and an abomination before God than someone who walks naked. The person is B'Tselem Elokim, and therefore we should feel embarrassed to be naked. We should cover up that which is important to us. And so they show they have no fear of God by doing so. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Elu Chabarim. Rabbi Yochanan says no. This pasuk is referring to these Naval is referring to Chabarim, are Persian pre-Zoroastrian priests. Rabbi Yochanan lived in Eretz Yisrael, and some messengers came and told him, listen, there's been a change of government in Bavel. This is in fact true. Before that, the Parthians were in charge, who were one group of Persians, and then the Sasanian dynasty took over from the Parthians, and so this new group of Persians, and the dominant religion under the Persians was Zoroastrianism, and these Zoroastrian priests now had more power than they did before. So Rabbi Yochanan heard this, Shega nafal, and he shuddered and he fell off his chair in fright and sorrow for the Jews of Bavel. He was in Eretz Yisrael under the Roman Empire, but he felt so terrible that the Jews in Bavel are now going to have to live under this new government that was not going to be friendly to them. But then the messenger said, no, don't worry, they take bribes. So he felt better. Okay, good. If they're corrupt, then, if we're in trouble, we could always give someone a bribe and get out of the trouble. Great story. Gazru al Shelosha mipene Shelosha. These Zoroastrian magicians came and they made 3 decrees because of 3 sins that Israel deserved punishment for. Gazru al Basar mipene Matanot. The Chabarim, they made a decree that the Jews cannot eat meat. No more ritual slaughter, no more kosher meat, because the Jews themselves did not give priestly gifts to the Kohanim as they were supposed to. So now, midah keneged midah, they don't deserve to eat meat themselves. And they said, you cannot use the bathhouses anymore, and that's because the Jews were not careful in immersion in the mikveh when they were supposed to properly. And the Persian priests would exhume the Jewish dead because the Jews were happy on the holidays of the non-Jews. They would take part and celebrate Halloween and Christmas, whatever the Persian holidays were. Shene'eman v'ayta yad Hashem bachem u'ba'avotechem. As it says in Shemuel, the God's hand was against you and your fathers. How could it be against the fathers? How could the fathers get punishment? The forefathers, they already died. Amar Baba Shemuel, zo chatuteh shachbeh tamarmor b'avon hayim metim mitchatetin. So this is how the forefathers could be punished by their bones being exhumed, and because the iniquity of the living, the dead also suffer. Okay, these 3 things are very interesting because of what we know about Zoroastrianism, that they considered water to be holy, and therefore they had a lot of purity laws, complex purity laws, similar to nidah laws, but their nidot would not go in water because they considered water holy. So they had other ways of purifying people, and they did not like that the Jews were dipping in water and putting their purity in the water, and so it makes sense that they would ban using mikvaot because it went against their own religion. Zoroastrians also considered land, the ground, to be holy, and they would not bury their own dead. They also wouldn't burn their dead, cremate, because they considered fire holy. Instead, the Persian Zoroastrians, they would leave their dead out to be eaten by birds. That's what they thought was the proper way of dealing with the dead. And so they saw the Jews burying their dead, and they were upset. Hey, Jews, you're defiling the land. And so when they had more power, when they were able to, they would exhume bodies. So while the Gemara here attributes these 3 things to 3 sins that the Jews do, that's the usual way of Nevi'im and the rabbis to find ways that we can make teshuvah ourselves. But historically, it does make sense that the Persian priests would be doing these things because, in fact, they went against their own Zoroastrian religion. Amar le Rava Rabba bar Mari ketiv lo ye'asefu v'lo yikaberu ledomen al penei adama yihiyu. Pasuk in Yirmiyah says they will not be gathered or buried; they will be left out like dung on the face of the earth. Uchtiv nimchal mavet mechayim. Another pasuk says that things are going to be so bad that death will be better than life. Amar le nivchal mavet l'rsha'im shelo yihiyu ba'olam hazeh ve'yechetu ve'yipelu begehinam. So I asked him, what does these pesukim mean? And he said, it means that it's talking about Risha'im, for whom death is better than life. Why? Because all they're doing while they're alive is negative things. They're causing bad to other people, and so it's better for them that they die and they at least stop doing bad things, and then they go to Gehinam and receive the punishment for what the bad things that they did do in this world. Katu b'Sefer Ben Sira. Okay, now we quote lots of pesukim from the Tanakh. Now we're going to quote the book of Ben Sira. Ben Sira was an important Jew that lived around 200 BCE, and he wrote a book called the Book of Ben Sira, which was not included by the rabbis in the Tanakh, but it was included by the translators of the Septuagint in the Septuagint, and therefore, since Christians took the Septuagint as their Bible, you will find Ben Sira in a Christian Bible, even though it's excluded from our Tanakh. Nevertheless, the rabbis had this book and had it in Hebrew. The original Hebrew was found in the Cairo Geniza. So now we have at least part of the original Hebrew of this book of Ben Sira. And even though it was excluded in Tanakh for whatever reason, probably because it was written too late, past a certain date, a cutoff point, in which after which we did not include attributed books attributed to people that we know lived after into Tanakh. Nevertheless, the rabbis appreciated the book and quoted it often, and sometimes quoting it as an authoritative source, almost as if it was a book of Tanakh. And here we're going to see a few quotes from this book of Ben Sira. It reads just like Mishlei. It's a book of wisdom. Katub b'sefer Ben Sira, Isha Toba, Matana Toba leba'ala. Back to the theme of a good wife is a good gift for her husband. וכתיב טובה בחק ירא אלוהים תינתן, אישה רעה סרעת לבעלה. And it also says, a good wife will be placed in the bosom of a God-fearing man. Someone who's Yireh Shamayim will merit to have a good wife. And a bad wife is like a plague to her husband. Mai takante. So what's the remedy if someone is in such a bad situation? He should divorce, and then he will be healed of his disease. Isha yafa yashre ba'ala mispar yamav kiflaim. A beautiful wife, and happy is her husband, and the number of his days are doubled, because he'll have a good life. Ha'alem aynecha me'eshet chen pentilached bimsudata. Turn your eyes from a graceful woman that's not your wife, because you may get trapped in her trap. Don't be attracted to someone else's wife. Altet etzel ba'ala limsoch imo yayin v'shechad. And don't go and hang out with her husband and have wine and drink with him. Ki b'toar isha yafa rabim hushchatu. Because that's only going to lead to negative things. By then they'll be looking at his beautiful wife, and many people have been destroyed by that. Asumim kol harugeha, right? Mighty, her slain is a mighty host. רבים היו פסעי רוכל המרגילים לדבר ערווה, כניסוס מעביר גחלת ככלו מלא עוף, כן בתיהם מלאים מרמה. Those who are accustomed to rochel, they go from one place to another, maybe salesmen, and they're going to wives when they're home and selling them things. This leads to illicit relations, and it is like a spark that ignites a coal. This desire is always there, and by going around and being this itinerant merchant, he's like bringing light to coals, like a cage full of birds. So these houses will be full of deceit. They're going to be lying and about it, and causing disruption of a peaceful home. Al tesar sarat machar ki lo teda ma yeled yom shema machar ba ve'enenu b'nimsa mista'er al ha'olam she'en shelo. Further quote from the book of Ben Sira. It says, don't worry about tomorrow's trouble, because you don't know what tomorrow will bring. You might be worrying about something that's never going to come. So why worry about it now before it even comes? Maybe tomorrow will come, and that problem will not come. And so then you'll end up having trouble for no reason that you don't need to be troubled with. Okay, pretty good advice. ביתך רבים יהיו דורשי שלומך גלסוד לאחד מאלף. Don't let a lot of people come to your house. Choose your friends carefully, and not everybody should be able to come. You should make sure to have a lot of friends who seek out your welfare, so when you need help, you'll have a lot of people to rely on. When you're telling a secret though, only give a secret to 1 in 1,000. Most people you can't trust with something secret. אמר רבי אסי, אין בן דוד בא עד שיכלו כל הנשמות שבגוף שמר כרוח מלפני יעטוף ונשמות אני עשיתי. The idea we already had yesterday, that the Mashiach will not come until all the souls have left this treasure house of souls that's called guf. As a pasuk in Yeshaya said, for the spirit that enwraps itself is from me, the souls that I have made. And so when will my spirit go forth? When all the souls that I've made go from potential to being actual and are born. Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Omer Kol Mi she'en osek b'fidav ribya כאילו שופך דם משמה שופך דם האדם באדם דמו ישפך וכתיב בתרי ואתם פרו ורבו. Okay, back to the subject of our original Mishnah, that anyone who does not partake in the mitzvah of be fruitful and multiply, not only is he not adding more life, it's the same as murder. Why? Because the Pesukim in chapter 9 said to Noah, one pasuk says, whoever murders, his blood itself should be spilled, because every human being is in God's image. And the very next pasuk says, "Be fruitful and multiply." So you see, these are back to back. They're two sides of the same coin. Killing someone and not bringing new life into the world. Rabbi Yaakov Omer, a person who does not involve himself in procreation is limiting God's image in the world. The same two pesukim, since it says that man is created in God's image, and therefore every new person that's born is a little bit more of God's image in the world. You're increasing the amount of divinity in the world, and so by not procreating, then a person will be diminishing God's image in the world. Ben Azai Omer Kilu Shofechta Milmet Hademut Shemar Vatem Peru Ervu. Ben Azai takes both of the statements that were said before, both that of Rabbi Eliezer and that of Rabbi Yaakov, and says both someone who doesn't do Peru Ervu is murdering and also diminishing God's image. Okay, that's Ben Azai. Amru lo Ben Azai. The rabbi said to Ben Azai, Yesh na'eh doresh v'neh mekayem. Neh mekayem ve'en na'eh doresh. V'ata neh doresh ve'en na'eh mekayem. They told Ben Azai, there are some people that teach beautiful words and they also do beautiful deeds. They practice what they preach. There are those who do good deeds even though they don't teach anything well. They show by example, but they're not great at teaching good things. But you're the opposite of that. You speak very well, you say good things, but you don't practice what you preach, because Ben Azai himself was not married and did not have children. So you're going and saying, right, how terrible it is not to fulfill Peru Ervu. You yourself don't fulfill it. אמר להם בן עזאי, ומה אעשה שנפשי חשקה בתורה? אפשר לעולם שיתקיים על ידי אחרים. He says, what can I do? My soul yearns for Torah. I'm in love with Torah, and so I cannot distract myself with anything else by getting married and having children. That's just me. So other people will have to fulfill the mitzvah of Peru Ervu. I'm devoted to this particular mitzvah, so I'm exceptional. And he was rather exceptional. Although there is another story that Ben Azai married the daughter of Rabbi Akiva after a long time. So according to that story, even he eventually did get married and had children. Tanya Idach, another version of what we just said. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Kol Mi she'en osek b'pirya v'ribya ki'ilu shofech damim shene'ema shofech dam ha'adam uchsmich le v'atem peru. Similar to what we said right here, Rabbi Eliezer, someone who does not involve himself in Peru Ervu is as if he is committing murder, because those two pesukim are back to back. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. So rather than Rabbi Yaakov, this version says Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov says it's like he is diminishing the divine image, and Ben Azai said the same thing. He says both, and they told him, how come you're not fulfilling? And he answered the same thing. So basically the same version, just slightly different name. When the Aron Kodesh would come back to the encampment after going out to war, so, just like nowadays we say when the Torah is brought back to the Aron Kodesh, so we say, return Hashem to the Rivevot, Rivava is 10,000. So Rivavot in plural is the minimum 20,000. Alfeh, Elif is 1,000. Thousands minimum would be 2,000. So altogether, the minimum amount of God returning to the encampment would be with 22,000 of Israel. Melamed she'en hashechina shora al pachot mishena alafim u'shnei rebabot misrael. So we learn from here that Shekhinah will not dwell upon less than 22,000 Jewish people. That's the minimum population you need for Hashem to dwell amongst them. Now imagine that the population of Israel was 22,000 minus one, missing one person. And let's say, this you could have had, this one person did not was not fruitful, multiple, did not have children. So this person, if he only had one child, then Shekhinah would have come. Because he did not, Shekhinah did not come. Right? You always have to assume that your vote might be the one vote that tips it over the edge. So don't say, what's the difference if I have a couple of children or not? No, that could be all of the difference of Shekhinah dwelling amongst us or not. Abba Hanan Amar Mishum Rabbi Eliezer Chayav Mitah. If a person does not engage in Peru Revu, then they are liable to the death penalty. Shneimar Ubanim Lo Hayu Lahem. Hayu Lahem Banim Lo Metu. Regarding Nadav and Avihu, it says that they had no children. Oh, so you see, that's why one of the reasons that they died. If they had children, then they would not have died. Acherim Omrim Gorem LaShechina Shetistalek Misrael. Shneimar Liot Echad Elohim Ul Zaracha Acharecha. Others say someone who does not have procreate causes Shekhinah to leave Israel, as it says that Hashem will be referring to Abraham, to be a God for you and for your children, and a God to your children after you. Bizman shezaracha acharecha Shekhinah shora, en zaracha acharecha al mishora alesim bala banim. And so we see that when a person has children that will follow him and continue his legacy, then the Shekhinah will dwell on him, because we know he has a future, right? Actually, this is based on the Peshat. Hashem says, I'm going to choose Abraham because he teaches his children. Tzedakah u'mishpat. I see he's going to have a future, worth investing in him, right? He's someone that's interested in a long-term deal. So then Shekhinah will dwell upon him. But if not, so where can the Shekhinah dwell after him? On stones, on wood, on trees, that he's going to be buried under a tree, under a stone. Where is Shekhinah going to dwell? It has to dwell upon the living, upon the legacy. And so you see, a key for Shekhinah is when one thinks about his future and brings up children and teaches them in the ways of Torah. That is the essence of dwelling Shekhinah. And so if we take all these lessons of having a good marriage, a good relationship, bringing up children well, then we can merit to have Shekhinah dwell amongst us. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.